Around 1905, Lottie Quillatade, daughter of a Laguna Pueblo leader in New Mexico, appears in ceremonial Kawaik attire, a worked belt and beaded necklaces. The scene from the semi-arid region near Albuquerque reveals how the community maintained rituals and garments on solemn days, passing on knowledge and symbols between generations. In 1908, Roland Reed photographed an Ojibwe woman in her territory. The clothing, ornaments, and utensils around her tell of work, trade, and winter. Her attentive gaze suggests choices made under external pressure. Details of canoes and furs indicate seasonal practices and movements, showing how the village sought to balance tradition and change. In 1900, Carl Wernz captured two Hopi girls in Hopi, Arizona, leaning against a window. They look outside as if following something important in the courtyard. Their narrowed eyes and close bodies suggest quiet conversation. The simple setting places the pair between the shadow inside and the brightness outside, leaving the question, what holds them there? In 1878, a Cheyenne woman was photographed at Fort Keogh, Montana, a military base created after the Plains Wars. She represents a people who migrated, negotiated, and resisted pressure from the United States. The portrait fixes a tense encounter, Cheyenne traditions facing an outpost that marked new rules in the West. Treaties were falling, and the buffalo was disappearing. At the beginning of the 20th century, Carlotta Chiwiwi appears alongside her daughters, Maria and Felicita Tura, in Isleta Pueblo. The scene, recorded by Poli, shows clothing, ornaments, and posture that reveal work, kinship, and rituals. It is a slice of daily life that helps to understand how this community lived and organized itself in times of change in the Southwest. Around 1900, Frederick Monson photographed Hopi girls from Sikomovi on First Mesa, Arizona, in the southwestern desert, lined up and wearing the traditional attire of their people. Their hairstyles and fabrics indicate the rites and routines of the community at a moment when tradition and change intersected. To look at them is to see how culture resists and adapts. In 1895, a girl from Taos Pueblo in northern New Mexico follows her daily routine among adobe houses and earthen courtyards. The rhythm of the village blends work, rituals, and family, heritage passed from generation to generation. Each of her gestures echoes centuries of presence in that place, as if the desert itself guarded her story in silence. In 1892, a young Kiowa woman wears ceremonial attire with beads and fringes that tell the story of her clan. Her direct gaze and firm posture indicate respect earned early. In the background, traces of the camp point to tasks and rituals. It is a turning point, with tradition resisting pressure from the United States and keeping the people's memory alive. In 1897, a Spokane woman poses in northeastern Washington. Frank LaRoche records heavy fabric, discreet ornaments, and a backdrop of trails and timber near the Spokane River in the region. It is not a studio scene. It's a clue to how people lived, traded, and resisted the settlers' advance. Looking at it today, we see change, loss, and a thread of continuity. In 1904, in what is now New Mexico, a woman of the Pueblo people was portrayed as the spirit of corn, a symbol of the harvests that sustain life. Among the Pueblo, corn guides rituals, defines the calendar, and holds the memory of the ancestors. Following this path reveals how work on the land and faith blend together in daily life. At the beginning of the 20th century, Carl Everton Moon set out to document Native peoples before urban expansion and federal schools changed their ways of life. He traveled through reservations and isolated villages, listened to stories, recorded names, and made portraits. Each session became evidence of customs, languages, and rituals that continued under pressure from the government and the market. At the end of the 19th century, a Taos Pueblo woman is photographed in her daily life. Woven clothing, tied hair, steady gaze. Around her, the life of the people continues with rituals, work, and care for the land. The moment preserves ancestral practices and shows how traditions stay alive when the community maintains, teaches, and shares them through stories. In the late 1880s, the United States was changing rapidly in politics, labor, and culture. In this whirlwind appeared Marcia Pascal, daughter of a Cherokee mother and Army officer George Paschal. Her name became a meeting point between nations. It carries the memory of a people and the weight of the uniform, opening the way to questions about who defines belonging. In 1894, a Kiowa woman was living through a time of transition. Each arrival of settlers changed the rules of land, trade, and faith. Between clan councils and government orders, she balanced rituals and caring for her children. She kept the fire of stories burning as she watched the village negotiate, lose, and reinvent paths under new maps and watchful eyes. Around 1900, a young indigenous woman appears in ceremonial dress. The beads and embroidery are not decoration. They tell who she is and what her nation holds sacred. In a country changing fast, she preserves the memory of her ancestors, showing how tradition crosses time and continues to hold meaning while we still long to know her story. In 1899, Frank Reinhardt photographed Hattie Tom, an Apache woman, at a time when old customs clashed with a rapidly changing country. The encounter becomes a bridge. It reveals a real person, surrounded by the choices and pressures of her time, and reminds us that indigenous history moved forward steadfast even as forces tried to change its course. Elsie Vance Chestuan appears in records as part of the Chiricahua Nation, one of the Apache branches. Her life spans years of forced removals, broken treaties, and struggles for territory. Following her story shows how entire families tried to preserve language, rituals, and kinship even under surveillance. That is why Chiricahua memory still fuels debate today. In 1886, when large shows toured the United States and filled public squares, Buffalo Bill's Wild West turned the frontier into a stage. There, Lizzie Longwolf gained prominence. Each act blended action and context, offering audiences a rare glimpse into indigenous stories seldom heard outside that circuit. In 1895, a record captured a young Hopi woman in ceremonial dress. What seems like a simple portrait becomes a clue. Her hairstyle, sashes, and fabrics tell how the community marked life stages and beliefs. By following these signs, one can see customs that cross generations and understand how daily life was tied to the sacred. It's not nostalgia, it's a map of living history. In 1899, Frank Reinhardt photographed Hattie Tom of the Chiricahua Apache people. Her steady gaze and ceremonial attire tell a story of resistance and care for memory. Each ornament indicates alliances, paths, and losses. Facing the camera, she asserts who she is and invites us to listen to that past that remains alive. It is an encounter between person, time, and land. In 1886, Isabel Perico Njadi of the Chiricahua Apache Nation was held as a prisoner of war. Her story crosses the final stretch of the Apache Wars, when the U.S. government closed borders, dismantled villages, and displaced families. Her face reminds us that the conquest of the West came at a high cost, and that whoever tells the story decides what becomes memory. Early 20th century. Alice, an indigenous woman, appears with features and clothing associated with the Cayuse, Walla Walla, or Umatilla, but her origin remains uncertain. Her braided hair, adornments, and surroundings point to migrations, alliances, and resistance. Who was she in everyday life? And what place did she hold in the history of the Northwest? In 1885, a young Comanche woman faces the camera, steady. Her hairstyle, beads, and heavy fabric tell of camp routines, hunting routes, and trade with settlers. Her gaze, part challenge, part caution, records a people under pressure from wars and treaties. It's not just a portrait, it's a clue to a world resisting change. Who was she, and what did she see there? In the early decades of the 20th century, a young Hopi woman prepares for marriage. Around her, the rituals of the American Southwest take shape. The hairstyle, the fabric, the adornments, none of it by chance. Each item marks alliances, memory, and future. What seems like routine signals a passage and the strength of a people who pass down knowledge from home to home between past and hope. In 1886, Julie Nelson poses in period clothing, perhaps marking a rite of passage. The fashion speaks of home sewing and scarce resources. Her firm gaze suggests someone negotiating duties and dreams. Without a diary or letters at hand, We follow clues in the fabric and posture to imagine her routine and her social limits in a country changing quickly. In 1895, George A. Addison painted Amy and Carrie Kiowa. He depicted two women on Kiowa Island in a scene that speaks of life and work. The figures occupy the center, the horizon opens the view, and the light guides the gaze. You find yourself wanting to know who they were, where they came from, and where they were going. The scene suggests bonds and echoes of local history. In the 1880s, young Comanche women took on tasks that kept the village standing, preparing food, tending horses, managing trade, and teaching children. Amid pressure from settlers and federal agents, they passed down rituals and stories, forged alliances, and ensured that their language and hunting routes were not lost.